Good morning. Today we hope to look at a few literary terms which are usually associated with prose. Now, before we begin, we would just have a quick look at the prose types and then we'll move on to the literary devices that are usually used in prose. Now, prose types, as you know, prose can be divided into two types. One is fiction and the other one is non-fiction. Fiction is characterized by the use of imagination. It need not be based on fact. The term fiction itself means that it is not fact, it is fictitious. So it is basically based on imagination, and the categories like fable, fantasy, folklore, myth, short story, science fiction, historical fiction, novel, all of this come under fiction. And the non-fiction pieces of prose are those which are not greatly imaginative, but they are based on facts. There is imagination used in the kind of writing, but then it is mainly based on facts. That is the difference. So, non-fiction pieces of prose include articles, autobiographies, memoirs, biography, encyclopedia, essay, periodical references, etc. Now we'll move into the literary devices, the common literary terms which are used when we talk about prose. The first term is adage. The adage is like a proverb. It is proverbial in nature, and they are brief pieces of wisdom in the form of short philosophical and memorable sayings. Now, the difference between proverb and adage is this. Um, Proverbs are more traditional, they are used in everyday speeches, but adages refer to more general truths with universal applications and they reflect wisdom. So, for example, the phrases like love is blind or don't judge a book by its cover, these are all adages which you come across when you read certain pieces of prose. The second important literary device is allegory. Allegory is a story within a story. Usually, you find two stories in an allegory, a surface story and a hidden story. So, in an allegory can be a story, it can be a painting or any piece of art in which the characters, images, and the events act as symbols. And the symbolism in the allegory can be interpreted to have a deeper meaning. So, an author may use allegory to illustrate a moral truth or a spiritual truth or a political or historical situation. Now, John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress is an allegory which reflects a spiritual truth. Whereas George Orwell's Animal Farm is again an allegory which reflects a historical or a political situation. This example that is given, the image that is given in the video, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others, is a quote taken from George Orwell's Animal Farm. Animal Farm looks basically like a story which happens in a farm where one animal takes precedence over the others. Now, this incident or this situation is used by Orwell to reflect the Russian Revolution, and it is usually considered as a satire against Stalin. So, that is allegory, where you have one story representing, symbolizing another social or political situation. So that's what the example that is given there. It might be a story about two neighbors throwing rocks at each other's home. That would be the surface story, but the hidden story would be the war between two countries. So allegory is sometimes very subtly used or sometimes very obviously used. The next literary device is alliteration. Alliteration is where you have a single sound repeating at the beginning of the words in a sequence. So they're placed close together. Now, this example, I have heard how hedgehogs hog the hedge. This is a sentence, this is a statement where the her sound keeps repeating. We call this alliteration, we call this device alliteration. The next literary device is allusion. Allusion is usually a reference to something else. It is a brief or indirect reference to a person, place, thing, or idea of historical or cultural or political significance. It doesn't describe in detail the person or the thing to which it refers. Uh, the person who alludes to another work uh, has in his mind that the reader already knows about the work. Now, the example that is given here, he is a real Romeo with the ladies, uh, is an example where you have Romeo, which is an allusion of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. So that is allusion where there is a reference to something else. The author mentions some other work or refers to an earlier part of some other work. That is allusion. The next literary device is anecdote. Anecdote is a very short personal story, and that is usually narrated to uh, give importance to or to explain a topic that the person is dealing with. So, usually, it is like adding personal knowledge or experience to that particular topic. Now, when we hear anecdote, two other terms come to our mind. They are memoirs and autobiographies. Now, what is the difference between memoirs and autobiographies? Both look the same because they talk about the personal incidents that happen in a person's life. But in the case of memoirs, it might be a collection of more isolated incidents. There need not be a continuity in the narration of incidents. That's a memoir. Whereas in autobiography, the memories are all united into a single story. So, in short, you can call memoirs as a collection of anecdotes, an anecdote as a single incident which is usually used to explain a particular topic. The next literary device is characterization, and characterization is the writer's tool. Uh, the author uses characterization to teach us about a person. Now, characterization is usually done in two different ways. One is direct or it can be indirect. And now, in direct characterization or explicit characterization, the information is provided by the narrator or the protagonist or the character that, okay, this person is like this. So, that is direct characterization where the narrator or protagonist explicitly states what the character is like. Whereas indirect or implicit characterization relies on the reader to decide what it means. So, indirect characterization uses the behavior, speech, the appearance, the opinions of other characters. All these are taken into consideration to know about the character, to understand the character. For example, in Robert Browning's Fra Lippo Lippi, which is a dramatic monologue, we find that Fra Lippo Lippi himself states a few things about him, that he was an orphan, that he came to this abbey, the monastery where he lives now. He came to that abbey when he was 80 years old. He was a poor man. You get to know a few features about that character from the character himself. That is direct characterization. Whereas in indirect characterization, again in Browning's the same poem, Fra Lippo Lippi, we find other people talking about Fra Lippo Lippi, which helps you to pass judgment on the character. Now that is indirect way of characterization, where the author uses some other people or the author uses the behavior. There is no direct statement of the character, but from the other expressions, from the micro expressions and from the other characters, we get to know more about the character. So that is indirect characterization. Now, usually the elements of characterization are physical, emotional, mental, social, spiritual, or environmental. So, all these bring together, help in the formation, help in the characterization of a particular individual in a story or a non-fiction. Now, when we talk about characters, it is important to note that there are different types of characters. One you call the flat character, which is two-dimensional in nature. There is no particular growth. There is only the uh, plain character that is presented before you through the story. That's a flat character. Whereas a round character develops over time. in the story itself. So, in coming of age novels or in Bildungsroman, we find round characters who develop over the course of time, whereas in certain other stories, you find only flat characters where uh, you just know the whereabouts of the character, nothing more about that person. So, that is a flat and round character. Now, static characters usually don't develop over the course of time. They are more like the flat characters, whereas dynamic characters evolve over a period of time, more like the round character. So that's about characterization. Now, when we talk of characters, it is important to remember two names, antagonist and protagonist. Protagonist might be a name that we usually hear. Protagonist is the main character, often a hero. Protagonist need not always be a positive person, it can also be a character with negative characteristics. But whoever is the main character of a story or a piece of writing, that person is called the protagonist. And the antagonist is the character who opposes the protagonist. He is often a villain, he takes the role of a villain. Whoever disrupts the course of the protagonist's actions is an antagonist. Now, for example, uh, in the story Batman, Batman is the protagonist and the Riddler is the antagonist. Or in the story The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy Gale is the protagonist and the Wicked Witch becomes the antagonist. Or the Harry Potter series, which everyone is familiar with. Harry Potter is the protagonist and Lord Voldemort is the antagonist. So that is the difference between protagonist and antagonist. Moving on to the next literary device, which is dialect. Dialect is very often used in region specific writings where there is a need to refer to the particular form of language spoken by some group of people. Dialects, the English itself has different dialects. The American English is one dialect, British English is another dialect, Southern English is another dialect, Black English, Australian English, all these are different dialects. Even Standard English is a dialect, but just that it became standard just because it had its own privileges over the historical period. Um, Another example would be if you take the case of Malayalam, the Thrissur Malayalam is a dialect. Kottayam, the Malayalam language which is spoken within Kottayam, that is another dialect, which is spoken in northern areas, that's another dialect of Malayalam. So it is not a different language, but a different form of language spoken by a special group of people. Another literary device is flashback. Flashback is a device which moves an audience from the present moment in a chronological narrative to a scene in the past. Now, very often, stories make use of this device, flashback. Uh, Even essays, narrative essays make use of this device. So, flashback is a very helpful device in prose writing, which you often find in many of the writings. Next device is foreshadowing, which is just the opposite of flashback. If flashback is going back, foreshadowing is trying to give a hint into the future. So, foreshadowing gives the audience hints or signs about the future. It suggests what is to come through imagery, language, or symbolism. It does not directly give away the outcome, but rather suggests it. As you see in the example that is given in the video, I'll just read out. But as she waved goodbye to Tom when he left for work that morning, Esther could not help feeling like something was very, very wrong. So that anticipation, that anxiety that Esther feels when Tom is going out, that is foreshadowing. That is the literary device that is used here. The next literary device is imagery. Imagery is language used by poets, novelists, and other writers to create images in the mind of readers. Imagery works at different levels. Imagery is basically sensual, based on senses. So it is sensual in nature. We have auditory images. It describes what we hear. It can be a description about a music or the noise or silence. Or it can be tactile. The image can be tactile, describes what we touch or feel. When you describe how the texture of the wall feels, like you are creating a tactile image, talks about the texture, movement, temperature. Gustatory is, it describes what we taste, the sour, sweet, acidic, bitter taste, salty taste. All these are gustatory images. Visual images are what we see, describes what we see, the colors. There is more focus on the colors, the shapes, the patterns, size. Or olfactory images describe what we smell. All these images help the reader to get more in tune with the writing, whatever he's reading. Another example for imagery. Now, this passage is taken from Ian McEwan's Atonement, a passage which very powerfully creates images in the mind of the reader. I'll read out. Another was a passion for secrets in a prized varnished cabinet. A secret drawer was opened by pushing against the grain of a cleverly turned dovetail joint, and here she kept a diary, locked by a clasp, and a notebook written in a cord of her own invention. An old tin petty cash box was hidden under a removable floorboard beneath her bed. Now, this passion for secrets is described through various images here. The varnished cabinet, the secret drawer, that again imposes the idea of secrecy. The turned dovetail joint, the diary which is locked by a clasp, or the cash box which is hidden under a removable floorboard. So all these reiterate the idea of secrecy. So all these images create in the mind of the reader the idea of secrecy. Moving on to the next literary device, which is irony. Irony is when there are two contradictory meanings of a situation, event, image, sentence, phrase, or story. And in many cases, it refers to the difference between expectations. Now, irony can be explained in four different ways. One is the verbal irony. Verbal irony occurs when a word or an expression means something different from what is actually said. Um, for example, as you see in this image, it is an ironing board which talks about this. Yeah, I love my job, making clothes fat. Oh, please give me more of that action. He says that he wants to do that job, but doesn't actually mean that you get that from the facial expression of that ironing board. So that is verbal irony. Says one thing but means another thing. The second one is situational irony. This occurs when a character's action have an opposite effect from what was intended, or it leads to a reversal of expectation or the unexpected. Now, for example, you might have seen tourists who claim that they want to roam around the world, they want to move around the world and see things. And it becomes ironical when they don't actually use their eyes to see, but they use their camera to see. So that is situational irony. When their actions have an opposite effect from what they intend. As you see in the image here, the situational irony, you see a couple who are seated at a beach. It looks like they are they went on a vacation and their plane has crashed. So that is situational irony. So situational irony is very often connected with fate. That is what you call the irony of fate or the cosmic irony, where a lot of importance is given to the fate. That is the fate decides, and fate acts opposite to what the person intends. Another irony is the dramatic irony, and dramatic irony occurs when there is a gap between what the audience know and what a character believes or expects. For example, if you see the image, you have a person with his specs on his forehead, and he asks the person next to him, "Do you know where my glasses are? I can't find them." And the other person is laughing because he knows where the glasses are, um, and there is a gap between what the speaker and the audience know. So that is dramatic irony. Uh, the next literary device is point of view. Point of view is the perspective from which the story is told. You can have different points of view based on different stories, based on different narrators. One is called the first person point of view, where the narrator describes as if he or she is seeing events through the eyes of the character, and he tells the story. So it's either the character telling the story or the narrator himself becoming the character and telling the story. The second one is the third person narration. The third person narration is where you have a totally different person other than the character describing what is seen. So the narrator here is not a part of the story but a spectator. And in the third person narration itself, we have three different perspectives which are possible. First one is the limited perspective. In limited third person perspective point of view, the narrator sees only what is in front of him or her. He is just a spectator of events as they unfold, and he is unable to read any other character's mind. That is the limited third person narrative. Omniscient third person is another perspective that we have. Omniscient narrator sees all, he knows all, he is like the all knowing God. Uh, he or she sees what each character is doing, can see into each character's mind, and he can pass a judgment on what the character is actually up to. The next one is limited omniscient narrator, and this is again another perspective where uh, the omniscient narrator, the all knowing narrator, can look into only one character's mind. So he or she might see other events happening but only knows the reason of one character's action in the story. Uh, So just to put it into image, we have the first person point of view, which uses I, my, we, our, me, us, uses pronouns like that. And the narrator speaks about himself or herself, and the narrator is usually the main character. Second person point of view uses you and your. Here the narrator speaks directly to the reader. And this is a very rarely used perspective. It is not very common in literature. And the next one is third person point of view, which uses pronouns like he, she, it, they, his, her, or their. The narrator watches the story but is not in it. He speaks about other characters but not himself. So the reason is because he is not a character, and he is either a person with limited knowledge about the characters or an omniscient perspective of the entire story. The next literary device is satire. Satire is the use of humor or irony or exaggeration or ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity or vices. Now, when we look at the essays, when we look at most of the essays that are prescribed for study, most of them are satires. Now, satire was a form of writing which was employed from the early 15th century itself. There were religious satires, there were political satires. Now, to understand what satire exactly is, I would like to bring in certain examples from the recent times. The popular song Gangnam Style, which was one of the hit in YouTube in 2000, from 2015 onwards. It is satire about the high class Korean lifestyles, the absurd dances, the antics of the person, the whole concept of being posh, all that is made fun of in that Gangnam Style song. There is another work, The Devil's Dictionary by Ambrose Bierce, which gives satirical definitions, satirical explanations to words. Some examples from Devil's Dictionary are love. One explanation that is given for love is a temporary insanity curable by marriage, or for patience, he gives the explanation, a minor form of despair disguised as a virtue. So that is the Devil's Dictionary, which is again another example for satirical definitions, which gives a lot of satirical definitions. The image at the right hand side of the video is taken from the recent Indian Express, and it is about this girl who holds a broom in her hand, and she says, I thought that home quarantine is Netflix and chill. Now, that's again another satire that she intends on this whole idea of how women are exempted from how they're forced to do all the housework in spite of all the entertainment. So that is another literary device. Moving on to the next one, the style. Style refers to the way in which an author writes or tells a story. It is what sets one author apart from another and creates the voice that the audience hear when they read. There are many there are many elements that make up a writer's style, like the tone, the word choice, grammar, language, techniques, and so on. So, usually, the writing style is defined using the following words. You call it either expository or persuasive or descriptive or narrative based on the different kinds, the different forms of writing. For example, if the if the person, if the prose writer employs a lot of narratives in his essays, you call it a narrative essay. That becomes his style. Or a person who is so keen on descriptions, his style becomes descriptive. If the person is if he intends more on persuasion, if he intends more on a change of thought pattern in the reader, that is a persuasive kind of writing. Or an expository kind of writing, which focuses more on explanations, giving reasons and explanations for a particular writing. The next one is tone. Tone refers to the feel of a piece of writing. What kind of feel a work gives, that is the tone of the work. It can be critical, it can be sarcastic, compassionate, angry, flippant, gentle. It can be proverbial. Those are the different tones that the authors usually employ. The last literary device we'll be looking at in today's class is the theme. Any piece of writing without a theme becomes pointless. Any piece of writing without a theme looks absurd. So, theme refers to the central idea or the topic or the point of a story, essay, or narrative. And it is not necessary that a piece of writing should have only one theme. There can be as many themes as possible, but there will always be a major theme which deals mainly with uh, the the entire idea of the piece of writing, and there can be minor themes also. So, when you look at a story, what appears on the top is the plot, the story, okay, the what happened, the actions that happen in the story. That is what appears on the top, and the theme is like this iceberg underneath the water. The theme has to be explored from the story. The theme is not directly stated in a story or an essay, but it has to be explored and found out. So that is another literary device. So these are a few devices that I wanted you to know before we move into our classes. I hope this class was beneficial to you. If you have any doubts, please make use of the Google Classroom for further discussion. Thank you.